I like to think of it as kind of a remnant of the prelapsarian like relationship with the cosmos, that our the kinship we're able to have with dogs is somehow, you know, reminiscent of the harmony that we were, you know, made to have with creation.
Wow.
And anticipates
That's
perhaps the new creation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of the Crab and the Cross podcast, a podcast featuring conversations between Catholics about the sublime and the ridiculous, the divine and the human, and everything in between. I'm your host, Mary Rose, and I'm so excited that you decided to join me. I'm really pumped to share with you the conversations I've been having over the past few months. I talk to priests and theologians, I talk to lay people, I talk to sisters, men, women, people who lean a little left, people who lean a little right. And my goal is really to have a real diversity of experience and thought on this podcast. I think the Catholic media world has become very factionalized, and I think that is somewhat antithetical to the universality of the faith. So I hope that this will be a place where you can come and learn something and also have some of your ideas challenged. If you like what you hear, I think you know the drill. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, like, comment, share, review, all that good stuff. If you don't like what you hear, you can write a mean-spirited note, and you can go outside and you can throw it into the abyss, and I'm sure it will be delivered where it belongs. Stick around to the end of the episode for a little explanation as to where the name for the podcast comes from. And now, my conversation with Father Christian Raab. Father Christian Raab is a Benedictine monk from St. Meinrad's Abbey in southern Indiana. He received his doctorate in sacred theology in 2015 from the Catholic University of America. He is the author of the book Understanding the Religious Priesthood, History, Theology, and Controversy. He has been a monk for almost 20 years and is in his 13th year of priesthood. Currently, he serves as an associate professor of sacramental theology at St. Meinrad's Seminary and an associate pastor of St. Joseph's Parish. Father Christian, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here.
So in preparation for our interview, I was listening to some Taylor Swift this afternoon to really try to get into your headspace.
That's funny.
Yeah. I have to admit, she is like actually growing on me.
Okay.
I think I had to kind of live some life, you know, go through some heartbreaks to like really connect with Taylor Swift. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe have like a little Swiftie fandom going on.
Well, so I didn't really know anything about Taylor Swift, or I knew very little. And then it's actually during the COVID, you know, shutdowns, lockdowns, I was had more time on my hands than usual. So I was trying to learn about things in the culture that I had sort of missed since I joined the monastery. And so I watched the whole of Parks and Rec, and I listened to Taylor Swift.
Nice.
Those are my COVID things that I sort of used to catch up on the culture. And I really started to I liked a lot of her music. So she's a very good songwriter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think like so she came out when I was in high school, and I think for me, like, I had to be different. I couldn't listen to what all the other girls were listening to. And so she wasn't like quite edgy enough for me.
Sure.
And I think now, you know, flash forward 10, 15 years later, like that's not a major concern of mine.
Yeah.
But also I think her music has matured. I mean, I think her lyrics have matured, her sound has matured. And so I think the latter Taylor Swift stuff is what I connect with.
I think I know a lot of people find her last couple albums, Folklore and Lover, to be kind of more redemptive of her. That she kind of grew up a lot, and she's matured as a person. And I mean she's not we don't want to make too much of any celebrity, but
Right.
she um, is just matured as a person that's coming out in her music. Um, and I used to be in bands and write songs, and did so for a long time. And um, so somebody who's written a lot of songs,
Yeah.
I was kind of blown away by her ability to write things that connected with so many people. Um, and she's not my generation, so
Sure.
it's not like I was looking for somebody to kind of be the mirror of my soul in Taylor Swift. But it's you know what you said about kind of needing to be different, that's interesting, because I know when I definitely would have been sort of from the same school, um wanting to be a little different, wanting something a little um not that everybody else was into. But actually what kind of floors me about her is her ability to connect with so many people. And um that's, the more I think about it, I realize like what a rare gift or talent that is.
Yeah.
There are very few artists who are able sort of to hit that nerve in so many people. And so it's kind of, that's what sort of makes me kind of in awe of a
Yeah.
talent there. Um, her, I think she's kind of on the level with people like Michael Jackson or Paul McCartney, who it's just like the amount of people that they are able to connect with is just on a whole different level for most musicians, pop musicians. So
Right. Right. No, I mean, for sure. I mean, she's not a niche interest at all, but
yeah,
maybe even though she started off in kind of the teen pop genre, like
yeah,
her fans have grown up with her. And
yeah,
I mean, I know people who are, you know, I don't know, in their 30s, 40s, 50s who like Taylor Swift. I know a lot of guys who like Taylor Swift, who
yeah.
some of them are reluctant to admit it. I think for a long time, my perception was that, yeah, she's just like a girl, like a female centric musician. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's
Yeah,
harder for female artists to appeal to males unless it's in like a very superficial way,
yeah,
like
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
just sort of the hot pop star. But I think like,
sure.
yeah, she has a lot of like genuine male fans.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, the other thing about her, besides kind of this, I think, emotional accessibility, that is like what she's connecting with so many people, because somehow she's that relatable to so many people, and that's very rare talent. And then the other thing that kind of like, I think is really neat about her is you see her challenging herself as a songwriter, because she tries these different genres,
Yeah.
and kind of masters them. So, she has sort of stuff that sounds like indie music, like on the Folklore album. She has sort of pop country. She has rock. And that way, she reminds me of Paul McCartney, who
Yeah.
is somebody who is kind of like, whatever musical game is out there to be played, I've got kind of enough confidence to go in it and do it really well. And again, that's like a rare talent.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's good at reinventing herself. I think, for a long time growing up, I always hated it when my favorite bands would like try to do something different. Like I remember like when like I love like punk rock, growing up. And I
Yeah,
remember like when Green Day came out with American Idiot, and I was like, what is this? Like
yeah,
go back to like the Dookie, like just sort of like, chill out kind of.
yeah,
And then they're trying to do something artistic, and I'm like, no, you're not that kind of artist. But like now I realize, okay, well, they're probably in their early 20s when their first stuff came out, and
yeah,
then they're like in their 30s, and they're like, we're not like doofy teenagers anymore. We need, something more sophisticated.
yeah. I think if creative people, artists, they really do have to keep things interesting for themselves. And um, so I respect artists,
Yeah.
when they do that. Well, this is an interesting place to start our conversation.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think music is culture
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. I mean, especially if you think
Mm,
about modern culture, like music and movies are essentially what our culture is. I try to think about like when I mean, I haven't traveled too extensively, but I try to
yeah.
think about what sets a culture apart. It's cuisine, it's music. And when I try to encapsulate like what is American culture, I mean, I don't think we really have a cuisine. The language is English, which we didn't invent. We're not old enough to have like traditional dance or whatever. So I think like our pop music and our movies are like our main
Hmm.
exports of culture.
Well, there's certainly the things that get exported. Yeah. Um, but some of those wells are really deep. Like I think particularly with the musical wells, American musical wells of blues, of country,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Tin Pan Alley. Um, those are really, I think, deep folk, deep cultural wells. So probably, if you want to understand America, um, musicology would be one of the probably the best ways to try to appreciate it.
Right.
Understand, I think, is not the most helpful word.
Hmm.
Appreciate American culture through its music. Yeah.
Right. Do you think that there are themes that American music has that you don't see as expressed in, like, say, music from Great Britain or other English
Mm,
speaking countries?
wow, that is really interesting.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't know the answer, but I'm just, like, just kind of popped in my head, like, um, because you kind of think about like what are the American ideals, and I forget who I
yeah.
was talking to, but a lot of our pop industry is like out in LA, like out in California. And I think West Coast is very different from East Coast. And some have made the case that like people on the West Coast, they're all descendants of people who were going out there for gold. So they kind of have different, in a way, have different values than like us
Oh
East
wow.
Coasters, we're a little more like down to earth,
Oh
less
wow.
dreams, but I don't know, maybe a little less religious.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I I haven't really thematically, like I haven't tried to compare American music so much to other things. Um, I would probably have to sit down and really, really ponder that
Yeah.
before I give an answer. Um, I do know I that like blues music and country music and bluegrass music, um, there are a lot of Christian elements in those.
Yeah.
Um, but it's often very Protestant, broad Protestant themes. So there's um, a lot of them are expressive of the experience of salvation.
Yeah.
Um, but in country music, I think I mean, good country music. I'm not
Yes.
in good country music. I think you find a kind of sacramentality,
Mm.
even though a lot of it's Protestant and it's uh, kind of philosophical source. There is a, a sacramentality still, maybe despite itself. I don't know.
Right.
Where you see people contemplating the everyday and and a certain sacred sense of everyday experiences. And in a Johnny Cash album, you have songs about love next to songs about crime, next to
Yeah.
songs about God. And I always like something like that almost more than listen to like a praise and worship
Yes,
piece,
absolutely.
because it's really expressive of life, and life includes all of that stuff, and then we find God in it, as opposed to sort of some kind of I've got my album of praise and worship music and that's sort of all it's about, but then it's somehow disconnected from the rest of life.
No, I agree. I think there's something almost dishonest about a lot of Christian, I don't know, pop music, Christian rock music, in a sense that it only expresses the I love you, God, I praise you, God, I thank you, God. And it's like, if you go to the Psalms, I mean, you have those, and then you have the my one companion is darkness, my tears have become my bread. And it's like, come on, like you have to have like the darkness too.
That's on point. The struggle of that there sometimes is in our spiritual life. That was a beagle.
Yeah. Hey, all right. Yeah, it's take your dog to work day, but
awesome.
Yeah.
The struggle that can be in our spiritual life sometimes does not get captured in contemporary Christian music.
Yeah.
And whereas if you listen to the blues, if you listen to country, it's there,
For sure. Yeah. So you mentioned like the Protestant roots of our country. This brings up something I wanted to ask you about. One of the, I don't know if America could take credit for the genre of rock. I think a lot of it comes from the UK, but there seems to be this undercurrent, especially in Christian circles, that like rock and roll is the devil's music, and there's something kind of inherently, I don't know, perverse about it. And I'm wondering, do you think that comes from like the puritanical roots of Christianity in America, or do you think there's actually some merit to that like Christians need to be a little bit suspicious of, that genre of music, or maybe other genres of music?
Wow, great question. So I think the answer is yes. To all of it.
Okay.
Right? Like including the beginning part. Like,
yeah.
Is that a kind of puritanical reaction? Yeah, I think so. I think the beginnings of rock and roll were really adult music played by African Americans, and played in bars with a lot of humor and a lot of sexual innuendo. And it got taken out of that context and played for white teenagers. And there was a lot of nervousness about the adult themes, about the sexual innuendo, about even the language of, rock and roll was a euphemism for sex. So,
oh wow, I didn't know that actually.
yeah. So there was a kind of a lot of fear and resistance to that, kind of those part that so I think there was a kind of puritanical reactiveness to early rock and roll. But I think that was probably short-sighted and narrow-visioned. And if you listen to a lot of 50s rock and roll, it's pretty chaste, even by standards then. There were guys just, the Beatles, I want to hold your hand. I mean, there's something, this is a kind
of, if only that were the lyrics.
Right. It's a kind of chaste, romantic, wooing kind of music. Rock and roll is a very big umbrella. Sure. And so some of that puritanical reactiveness was overreaction. Probably some of it was an appropriate reaction for music that really wasn't meant for kids, kind of being brought to kids. And probably, some of that early rock and roll was a little too boundary pushing, where, they were taking tropes from gospel music and certain like things that would have been sung, for God, and kind of turning it into sexualized music. And so you had those aspects too. So I can understand those early reactions to rock and roll. But like I said, I think it's always been a big umbrella, and there are other pieces. When you get into the 60s, rock and roll becomes rock, which is really, in my opinion, that shift in language is a shift where it's no longer about dance music.
Yeah.
It's about, and it's
About
about,
punching people in a mosh
well,
pit.
exactly. Well, no, in the 60s, it was about a message.
Yeah.
And a
Oh yeah,
lot of
for
it
sure.
was very anti-institutional. And so you have the Beatles and you have Bob Dylan, and you have Paul Simon, you have a lot of people pushing back against institutions. And I think for a lot of artists pushing back against institutions in the 60s, one of those institutions would have been the church and religion. And so there's an element there that, you know, doesn't jibe well with Christianity. You know, especially for Catholicism, where, you know, tradition matters.
Right.
So I think that, you know, that's another kind of legit Catholic critique of rock. Ratzinger, you know, in his book, The Spirit of the Liturgy, he kind of takes issue with the way rock concerts sometimes almost become idolatrous
Yeah.
in their kind of energy. And
Yeah. No, I mean, I can definitely attest to that. And I always felt a little bit uneasy about that aspect because I
yeah,
like live music and I like
yeah,
rock music. And there's just a sense of like, you know, you're in this crowd, you're putting your hands up, you're screaming, you're cheering.
yeah,
It really feels like worship in a sense, especially if you compare it to like a charismatic kind of worship service,
yeah,
like the same gestures and everything. And
yeah,
you know, a lot of times the lead singer or someone on stage is giving you things to call out back and forth. So you kind of have this like,
right.
you know, dialectic
Yeah, yeah,
going. And yeah, there is something uncomfortable about that.
yeah, it can be. And I think particularly for me, the themes and content of the music itself, you know, govern just how I'm going to feel about participating, you know.
For sure, yeah.
So if the music is become particularly focused on, you know, the opposites of truth, beauty, and goodness, ugliness and
Evil.
evil and falsity, then especially it feels bad. But I do think that there are, you know, artists and pieces of music that in rock that truly are reflective of the true good and the beautiful. And so, you know, letting that sort of fill up our hearts doesn't feel like a problem to me.
No, I mean, I think some of it too is like the crowd mentality and then whatever people's expectations are. I mean, I
Yeah,
think one of the last concerts I went to was the Avett Brothers, and I love the Avett
yeah,
Brothers, and I think their music is representative of good, true, and beautiful for sure. And it
yeah,
also has all of that kind of Christ hauntedness stuff that we were talking
yeah,
about earlier. But it was
yeah,
actually really disappointing to go to their concert because just the way the crowd was behaving, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
where everyone's standing up, everyone's screaming, you know, people are
yeah,
drunkenly singing along, and
yeah,
it's kind of annoying in a sense, you know, people are
yeah.
smoking pot
It
and
starts to feel like that kind of revelry, you know, from the
exactly.
book of Exodus, the
Yeah.
golden calf. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
No.
Right. Well, you brought up the spirit of the liturgy, and I think one of the big debates nowadays between people who, you know, are very passionate about liturgy is liturgical music.
Oh yeah.
And I think, you know, there's definitely the like the music that kind of became popular after the Second Vatican Council. I mean, my parents have memories of hearing, you know, Bob Dylan type
Oh
songs
yeah.
at the
Yeah.
mass, you
A
know,
folk mass. Yeah.
folk mass, sure. And you know, I mean, well, it brings up two questions. One, I mean, I think we can probably say it's not appropriate to have a pop artist, a Bob Dylan song, no matter how deep and spiritual it might be. It's probably not the right song at all to have at the mass because it wasn't written to be a song of
Right.
worship.
Yeah.
But some even go so far as to say like, and anything that is an imitation of that genre at all, like you shouldn't have a folk guitar song at the liturgy. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Um. Uh, I'm probably, I don't think that I would go as far as some of those critics go.
Yeah.
I do agree with the point that, you know, one, I think this is stated in Sacrosanctum Concilium and elsewhere that, you know, that sacred music really should be music that is composed for a liturgical purpose. And so that's the kind of music that we would want to use in our worship services. Um, I am, you know, probably I've traveled a lot, you know, I've traveled a lot throughout the world, and I've seen a lot of different styles of music in the mass, um, in India, in the South Pacific, in Brazil, in various neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. I I know that there's a kind of school that would take a very narrow focus and say, you know, we have to have like it's sort of Gregorian chant or nothing. And I'm probably not on the same page with that. You know, I think there's more room for other things. Um, so, you know, I think
Yeah.
it's
It's
possible to have different kind of styles.
right. Yeah, I mean, it kind of brings up the question of what is the liturgy supposed to be? Because on the one hand, I think there's obviously a transcendent aspect to the liturgy, we're
Sure.
like mirroring the worship of God in heaven. And I like chant because it does create this very otherworldly sense to it, especially
Hmm.
when it's in Latin, when you can't really translate in your mind like what is being
Yeah.
said. You sort of feel like you're being transported, to
Sure.
another realm, so to speak. But it's like at the same time, when we think about the incarnation, it's like God entering into the familiar and to
Yeah.
the culture that already exists. And I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't know to what extent there should be an enculturated liturgy. I mean, I think you could obviously make the case that, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess chant evolved out of monastic life. So it wasn't like some pre-existent genre that people were just sort of, doing sacred, like a polyphony sound, like in the streets or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, is the mass supposed to be more transcendent or more like incarnational?
Yeah. I think it was Chesterton who said, or it was somebody aping Chesterton who said, you know, um, the liturgy should feel like home, but it should also feel like a foreign prince.
Hmm.
And I do think that both of those things are true. It's kind of the tension we have between the incarnational and the eschatological. It's a tension
Right.
we have between nature and grace.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that there are, because we're the liturgy, and there's an aspect where it is transfiguring uh the things of our lives, you know, with the bread and wine, are pretty ordinary things, and they're um and we don't put on costumes to go to mass. We might put on nice clothes, but
Right.
we're not going as something other than ourselves. So there is an aspect where it really is home.
Right.
um but but probably there should be some things liturgically that remind us that grace is coming from outside and above. And and so the music, you know, I the chant has, I mean, I joined a Benedictine monastery, and it was partly because of the liturgy and the beautiful liturgy, which had a transcendent sense, and it was unlike things that I could experience otherwise. But you know, I've been to masses where there was a guitar, and I thought it was tastefully done and
Right.
works for me.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if to some extent we make too much of this problem. It's like
Yeah,
Christ is present,
yeah,
um, and he can show up. He's not limited by whatever our instruments are that
yeah,
we're employing. I mean, I
yeah.
obviously there are things that I think can draw more attention. There's this I won't call this place out too directly, but there's this retreat center that I went to, and they have a choir there. And so in their chapel, you have all the seats facing each other, in like a long row, and then you have the altar in the middle, just like on the same ground level as the seats. And then up against like where your eyes are directed, where there's this big, beautiful mosaic, there's a stage that's about 3 feet high off the ground, and they have the choir and the band up there. And it's just, to me, there's something really gross about that, because your attention is just, it feels like her performance, and even the way that they perform is very, I mean, it feels like a performance. It doesn't feel like it feels like we're there to see that.
I wonder if it's something, you know, less about particular genres than maybe some other attitude that's brought to. I could say, yeah, you know, I don't really want to go to a hip hop mass, and I don't really want to go to a house music mass, and I don't want to go to a folk mass, and I don't really want to go to a polka mass. but you know, have you ever listened to Mary Lou Williams' jazz mass? It's unbelievable. It is so powerful and so beautiful. Mary Lou Williams, I highly recommend people look it up and listen to her. She has 2 things she did. One is called the Black Christ of the Andes, and it's a mass that she composed for the feast of St. Martin de Porres, and it is awesome. You know, meanwhile, you know, we have kind of classical, you know, 18th century classical music composed masses that I think are also pretty lovely. That's not medieval chant, you know.
No, true.
So, and it's really a different genre, but it's still quite beautiful. I'm not a musicologist. I just and I know frankly less about sacred music than I do secular music.
Really?
These are some of my half-baked opinions that I'm trying to offer for your listeners today.
That's what people come to the internet for, is half-baked opinions.
Half-baked opinions. I hesitate to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I have this kind of joke that, like, because as a priest and a professor, I have this kind of joke and with my seminarians, and I'll say, you know, as a priest, you may have something in the church's teaching that you don't get, you know, or you buck up against, and you still have to tell people like what it is, and like you have to communicate the church's teaching. It's not about your opinion. It says everybody probably has something, and let me tell you what mine is. And they all kind of get silent, and I don't know what they think I'm going to say. They think I'm probably going to take up some kind of controversial hot button issue, but then I say, I buck up against the line in Sacrosanctum Concilium about the organ being the preferred instrument of the liturgy.
Okay, I can relate to that, because okay, I don't mind like a kind of, you know, low pipe organ, but
yeah,
I mean, at the shrine, like we were both, you know,
I wasn't gonna say it.
I can't. It's so. I don't know. Sometimes
it's so loud that you can't sing.
Yeah.
And that you can't hear the other people singing. And unfortunately, it seems like it's more often that way than not when it comes to the organ. Right. Is it drowns everything out. And so I really love going to Eastern Rite liturgy. And you know, they just sing everything. And to me, that's the preferred instrument, is the human voice, you know.
I agree. Like a chord performed by an a cappella, you know, quartet versus a chord played on the piano, the organ, the guitar. It like hits you differently. Like you feel it. I don't know. I don't want to, you know, too poetic, but like you sort of feel it like deep in your soul. Like as soon as that like first, you know, chord is hummed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And no, I mean, I know the organ is a very difficult instrument to play, and I like the sort of normal church organ, but like some of these like massive, you have so many other sounds like going on. I don't know. I mean, sorry.
Tends to dominate the experience.
Right.
So, whereas, you know, just a little guitar, not a strummy folk song, but a little like Taizé style guitar background, I really can love that. You know, or a piano instead of an organ, I can love that in the liturgy.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah, I mean, there's an art to it. I think certain, if it's like it's Christmas Mass, the closing hymn is Hark the Herald, Angels Sing. Like sometimes there is something beautiful about the organ just, laying it on thick and you just feel this exuberance. But it's not for every Mass or for every part of the Mass, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go, we have to talk about something that maybe is a little more familiar to you.
Okay.
So, what is going on with these dogs?
Oh, so my dog Lexi, she's a German Shepherd. Um, she had puppies on June 3rd.
Was this a planned pregnancy?
No, it was
Uh-oh.
not. So I used to say that Lexi was really good at poverty and chastity and not very good at obedience. And now I just say she's still good at poverty.
That's hysterical. So how many puppies did she have?
Well, she had 5. We lost one. It's not unusual. So one of the puppies, he passed away after a couple weeks. And then we had 4. And so actually now they've all been homed. So
Good.
I don't have any more.
I've just been seeing this all over Facebook. And I'm like, has Father Christian, like, is he just in the dog breeding business now? Like he's not even
No.
doing the monk stuff. It's just
It was really a beautiful experience. I don't want to do that every year, but it was really neat. I love dogs. I've always loved dogs, and
Same.
and the puppies were so cute.
Oh,
They were a lot of work, but
yeah.
it was pretty awesome to be a part of it. And oh my gosh, I mean, I could talk for hours about Lexi's like God-given programming.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. Like just her, what it means to be like a mother, like her instincts were, I was in awe. It was so cool to watch. She where we had the one puppy that just wasn't doing well, and she would kind of like push the other ones away, like, and allow that one to nurse by itself because it couldn't compete.
Wow.
And I mean, even really from the first moment that the puppies came out, like they're kind of born in these like sacks, and she knew, that she had to break those sacks,
Yeah.
and that she had to chew off their umbilical cords. She had to lick them until they started to move. She knew how to do everything, and it was just really amazing to kind of
Yeah.
watch. And
That's interesting because a lot of species, like if there's an offspring that's sickly, they just abandon it or
yeah,
eat it. Sometimes they eat it.
yeah. Well, she did actually eventually. She abandoned it. She did, because she knew. Um, and I think too, there's probably some sense there of, well, I just say I like to think that there's some sense of communicable disease that
Sure.
if this puppy's sick, it might get the other one sick. So what she tried to do is keeping them apart,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then, but eventually, he just lost his will to live.
Oh.
So um so yeah, anyway,
Yeah. How long have you had Lexi?
I've had Lexi for 5 years.
Okay. So just, I mean, being that you're a monk, being that you take a vow of poverty and
Uh-huh.
obedience, like, was there sort of a chain of approval to get a dog? Like, how did that kind of work in the, monastic life?
Well, it's kind of funny. There was an older monk who got Lexi. Um, he was the gardener, and he made the case that he needed a dog to kind of protect the garden. And keep the deer out. And so he got her, and he was older. And honestly, it was within a year of getting her that he basically got too feeble to continue gardening. And I did not want to garden, but I was willing to take over the dog. And so um, that's how I ended up with her. And yeah, I think, not quite the same level as Franciscans, but Benedictines have a tradition of we're really kind of a rural order. And so, and there's a lot of, farms that are attached to Benedictine life. And traditionally there was a lot of animal raising, cows and goats and things like that. And, so for me, it kind of fits within that tradition.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that
mean,
makes sense.
it's not like we're not raising her for food or anything like that, but it's you're kind of cultivating a part of the earth, and
Sure.
and helping things kind of reach their telos, and it's beautiful. So I'm very happy that I have a dog to
Does she
spend time with.
like in your cell? I don't know if you use that language.
Yeah, so she I actually recently got assigned to a parish, and so she actually has come with me to the parish. So we're living in a little hermitage.
Oh.
Yeah, it's great.
Like you and another priest?
No, just me and the dog.
Oh, just you and Lexi, really?
Yeah. The other priest, the pastor, lives across the street.
Okay. That's kind of like me. Like, I mean, I don't live in a hermitage, but it's just me and my dog. Like,
well, you do live in a hermitage. You just don't call it that.
Sure.
Yeah. Lexi's name, by the way, is Lexi O Divina. That's her full name.
That classic monk move.
Well, so we got her as a rescue, and her name was already Lexi, but we had to change it, to be more monastic. So
right.
Lexi became Lexi O Divina.
Her new name, Yeah, I don't know. There's like, oh, hey, five. Wait, I have to show you mine. He's sitting here.
Yeah, that's a good boy.
This is Milo.
Nice.
And the great thing about him is he's a permanent puppy. Like he's like 3 years old, but he's mixed with a dachshund, so he's just like a little thing.
Nice.
But I don't know. There's something. I actually want to get your thoughts on this. Like, there's something special about dogs, in my opinion. And okay, this is deep. Okay, I have this, like, it's sort of a joke, but it's sort of serious. I call it Theology of the Doggie.
Yes.
Okay? It's like, all right, God made man in his image and likeness, and I think that man made dog in his image and likeness. And if you think about it, like, so every dog is just a descendant from the gray wolf.
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which, I mean, we can't get into like divine causality at this time, but like there's a sense in which God didn't make the dog like we did, because we bred these wolves to get all kinds of breeds that are, as tiny as a dachshund, as big as a Great Dane. Like, I don't know. I see in dogs, and maybe I'm somewhat anthropomorphizing it, but they seem to have these very human-esque characteristics that I don't see in other animals.
I think that's awesome. You know who thought about this a lot is C.S. Lewis.
Really?
Oh yeah. He has quite a, like, he doesn't have an extended statement, but you can find pieces in tons of his writings about his thinking about animals and dogs in particular. Yeah. And somebody really needs to collect them and like synthesize them into a dissertation.
Oh, I'll do that.
Yeah, you should. But
and much to my dad's dismay, he'll be like, they'll be like, oh, what's your daughter doing her PhD dissertation on? Not gonna want to say it.
No, but it's cool. Yeah, I mean, and Lewis actually makes kind of a similar point to what you're saying, that like with the way that grace actually helps us kind of move above our nature, that dogs, like our experience with dogs is we're actually helping them sort of transcend like
Yes.
like just being these like beasts,
Brute,
like
yeah, these brute, yeah.
yeah. And so I mean it's not I'm sure like a strict Thomist would quibble with a lot of distinctions that I'm not making,
Right.
but
But it's like an analogy of
it's an
being in a
analogy,
way,
that yeah, the way that like God actually kind of stoops down and helps us raise up to him.
Yeah.
That there's this long human relationship with the dog that is kind of a stooping down to raise up, and it gets recapitulated in every dog's, but that dogs can actually be brought to this pretty high level,
Right.
And it's really beautiful. And there are they found these tracks of like some of the oldest human footprints in the world. And I mean these are, I don't know how many tens of thousands of years old, but they're the oldest preserved like footprints of an erect hominid,
Okay, yeah.
and there's paw prints right next to them.
Oh, wow.
And so that this companionship between human beings and dogs is really ancient and
Right.
and beautiful. And I think I like to think of it as kind of a remnant of the pre-lapsarian like relationship with the cosmos, that our the kinship we're able to have with dogs is somehow, reminiscent of the harmony that we were, made to have with creation.
Wow.
And anticipates
That's interesting.
perhaps the new creation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also think like, I don't know, to kind of go back to the analogy, I think as humans, we have a hard time understanding how God can just love us unconditionally, like in spite of our faults, and love us no less even when we do commit faults. And I think there's an analogy there with the dog, like in the sense that I love my dog. He doesn't do anything. I mean,
You
some
love them
dogs
just
are,
you love them just because.
yeah, like,
So
I mean,
it's
some
about
dogs are
their
useful.
being.
My dog is not useful.
Right. You just love the goodness you're affirming the ontological goodness of being in your
Right.
dog, and when people say good boy, right, they say good boy, right, that's like a metaphysical statement. It's an ontological statement. It's not really a moral statement. It's good boy, you good boy.
Right.
It's really just a good, yes, I'm affirming the goodness of your being.
Right. And God saw that it was good.
Yes. Yeah, isn't that great?
Right.
I love it.
And even like, like I was driving with my dog to work today, and he's like kind of freaking out in the car. He's just sort of crying and getting agitated because he doesn't know what's happening, and I can tell him all I want, like, it's gonna be okay. We're just going to work. I'm not abandoning you. Like, everything's fine. I have it under control. And like, he can't comprehend that. And I was just thinking, like, sometimes, in prayer, when we're just like begging God for something, and he's like, I can see further ahead than you. It's going to be okay. It's all good. But like, we almost can't receive that message in the same way that my dog cannot receive, like, he can't really understand, like, what's the terminus of our act.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insightful. You should write this dissertation. I want you to. I think I will read it.
Dude, and then I can call it Theology the Doggie, and I can, like, irritate like half of the TOB people, and the other half will be like all over it.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe I will. I need to take a breather. I just finished my master's last summer, and I'm like, let's not open any thick books and write any papers for a while. But maybe, I mean, it would have to be something that would, I mean, if you think about a dissertation, it has to be something that hasn't been totally done or totally solved. You want something unique, and then you also want something that can hold your interest on a personal level.
I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, actually, okay. Do you know Jimmy Akin, the apologist?
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I've listened to a couple of his podcasts.
Okay, yeah, his Mysterious World podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you listen to the one he did about the dogs?
No, I should.
Oh, yeah. It's great because he really does get into the question of like, can dogs go to heaven, whatever. And
Okay.
he's more open than probably most people have been. And he cites like Peter Kraft. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sort of agnostic on the, do all dogs go to heaven, but I've become more on the side of like, I mean, God can redeem whatever he wants. Like if God wants to have dogs in heaven, like there's nothing I don't know, it's not like a blasphemous thought. I mean, it's not ever going to be dogmatic, but like maybe.
Well, yeah. I'm probably hesitant to talk about any particular dog being in heaven.
Yeah.
But
the type or the.
But when you talk, yeah, exactly. Like it's a new creation, and I mean, particularly if we're talking about Earth 2.0,
right, new heaven, new earth.
Yeah, that there, unless you're just sort of, I mean, imagining, big like concrete, lifeless, scenario where it's just, I don't know, the biblical picture, and I realize the Bible is written metaphorically in many ways, but the biblical picture is really lush with
trees and
yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Are there animals in the book of Revelation? I'm trying to think.
Well, I don't know, but I don't, certainly in the Psalms, when we look at kind of the Psalms that we particularly think of being eschatological, there we really do talk about all of the creation blessing the Lord.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. Sea creatures and dolphins bless the Lord.
Yeah, and that's Book of Daniel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And Psalm 148, I think. So there's this kind of vision of all creation, and I mean that it also ties together Eden and the end times, and I mean God redeems, he saves, he's what saving is a salvaging, and so it's not a, I think Yves Congar has this quote, that it's not a taking, he says it's a marvelous refloating of our earthly vessel, not the transfer of survivors to another ship. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. No, I mean there's something to reflect there. Just, I mean, when you think about like, I mean, I think some theologians take a very negative view of creation, and others take like a more maybe positive and integrated, harmonious view. And you can go too far to that spectrum where you almost are like, worshiping nature, and that.
Yeah, don't want to do that.
Right. But it is. I don't know. It's all things will be made new, and maybe that means dogs. I kind of hope there's dinosaurs in heaven too, honestly. Like, I mean,
I love it.
Like, just like why? Like, I have many questions for God, but one of them is like, you make these massive creatures, and like none of us, you wipe them all out before we get to see them.
I love the idea of dinosaurs in heaven. That is great.
Like, let us appreciate. I mean, the
I want to hang out with the giant sloth. That's what I want to hang out with. Yeah.
Interesting. Why?
I mean, have you been and seen like the recreations of the giant sloths? They're amazing. Oh, they're like the size of small apartment buildings. They're enormous. Yeah. Seriously? Oh, they're so cool. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. Go to the down to the Smithsonian and the Natural History Museum. They have these recreated, they're I think they're bigger than the mammoths,
Really?
Yeah, and they're sloths. They're so cool.
I love giant animals. Like,
yeah.
There's just,
especially furry ones.
Yeah.
They're not threatening.
Well, I do like the saber-toothed tiger though. Like that is
Oh yeah.
amazing animal. And so yeah, but giant, there's something about the giant ones. I don't know. Okay, well, we could talk about every animal, mythical or
Yeah, we
real or
could.
extinct.
Sure.
But it's been so much fun talking to you, Father
You
Christian.
too, Mary Rose. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been fabulous.
Absolutely. And are you, I don't know, are you like on Twitter or anything like that? Or
No,
probably good.
I'm not on Twitter. I keep my Facebook limited to people I know in
All right.
person. And so
If people want to contact you, they can pray for you, or they can
pray for me.
tell their guardian angel, send your guardian angel a message.
I do have a book coming out next year.
Oh, nice.
On some of the stuff we're talking about today. It's called Walk the Line, a rock lover's primer for discerning orthodoxy. And so that will be out in 2023 by New City Press. And so I'm editing that book. There are multiple contributors. So that I'm just going to take this last moment to plug. Hope you don't mind me sending out a plug.
No, please. That actually sounds really interesting. And yeah, we'll have to talk about who else is contributing, because they might be really interesting guests to talk to as well.
We'll do that. Okay.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Father Christian.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Bye-bye. Very cool.
Yeah.
And you do this podcast. What's it going to be called?
It's going to be called The Crab and the Cross. And that kind of evokes a couple things. One, like we're Maryland, so crabs.
Oh, yeah.
Maryland also has a very deep Catholic Jesuit history.
Yeah.
Where I am, St. Mary's City, is where the first Catholic colonists came, 1634.
Wow.
And they were all Jesuits. And there's this story of actually St. Francis Xavier, I think on his way, I forget if it's to India or Japan, but the sea is like really rough. And so he takes his cross off and he puts it in the sea to like calm the storm. But then of course he loses his cross. And then when he lands, a crab actually brings it to him. So I was like, this kind of fits like the Maryland, the Catholic, it's also like sort of weird, I kind of like that. It is
weird.
The sublime, the ridiculous, it's all.
Well, that's it's funny because that's one of my nicknames,
The crab or the cross?
Crab.
Really? Oh, because you're my last name. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it's not pronounced Rob.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's pronounced Rab.
Have I said it wrong my entire life?
Probably. Most people do. I don't correct them. So
Rab.
It's Rab.
Oops.
So it's crab.
Oh. All right.
So C-Rab, crab.
C-Rab. Yep. That's good. That's a good nickname.
It is. I wish we would have made that connection.
I know. Yeah. Next time.
Next time.